Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Building a Positive Employer Brand, How to Stand Out from the Crowd, presented by HR Grapevine, along with our partners at Peoplesafe. My name is Eric Niewarowski. I'm the Deputy Head of Content here at HR Grapevine, and I'm also the host of the HR Grapevine podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, this morning. We're going to have a great session. And before we get into it, I just want to do a couple of logistical things. Our chat is open, so please ask your questions to all of our panelists today. We'll get to them at the end of the session. We have a couple polls open. We have one open right now that I'll get to in 1 second. And we're also making available the Peoplesafe report, Overcoming the Employee Safety Gap, which is available for download. So there's that resource button there. Click that and you'll get it to download straight to your inbox. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Freddie McGrath, Marketing Director at Peoplesafe. And along with that, along with Freddie, we also have Tobin Murphy-Coles, CEO of Amba People, and Dave Pardoe, Head of Profit Protection at The Works. They're going to do a more proper introduction in a second. But why are we here today? Well, employee experience and well-being are increasingly important considerations for candidates and existing workers. So how can your organization stand out from the crowd? So in this webinar, we are going to look at some of the latest research around well-being and perceptions of personal safety and the impact that can have on employer branding. We're also going to take a look at how employers can show they are displaying their values through their comms and the benefits packages they offer. So before I hand it off to the panel, I just want to quickly introduce that first poll, which is up right now. Are your benefits packages aligned with the values of your organization? So go ahead and vote on that right now. And while we wait for the results to come in, Freddie, I'm going to hand it over to you, and please introduce yourself and then let the rest of our esteemed panel introduce themselves as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Eric. So hi, I'm Freddie McGrath. I'm the Marketing Director here at Peoplesafe. So we essentially provide technology that helps to keep people safe, hence the rather Ronseal name of our company. What we do is we provide devices and apps that connects people when they're in emergency with our alarm receiving center, which helps get emergency support to that person directly in a much faster way than 999 does. So I'm going to talk today a bit about some reports and a survey that we've done earlier that connects that kind of personal safety with well-being, mental health, and also looking at the employer brand. So that's me, and I'll hand over to Tobin.
Morning, everybody. Thanks, Freddie. My name is Tobin Murphy-Coles, the CEO of Amba. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I built and sold many businesses over the course of my career, always been focused in the employee experience, employee benefits space. And that leads really nicely to Amba. Amba, really, if I was to try and encapsulate it in a nutshell, is to try and create a sense of belonging between employee and employer, using benefits and rewards as the leverage to be able to do that. We'll talk more about it when I go through some slides shortly. We're a technology business, very much like Freddie. There is a piece of tech that brings this alive for everybody, particularly the employees, to enjoy a wonderfully aligned employee experience with your values as an employer. Thanks, Freddie.
And over to you, Dave.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, virtually. So I'm Dave Pardoe. I'm Head of Profit Protection for The Works. I've been in that position for around about 10 months now. Prior to that, I spent 6 years with the retailer Card Factory, where I was proud to lead that team to be the UK's 2018 Retail Risk Team of the Year. So all in all, I've around about 35 years in the industry. Thank you.
Great. Great to meet you guys. Thanks for joining us today. So Freddie, before you get in your presentation, I'm just going to go ahead and do the results of the poll. So the first poll was, are your benefits packages aligned with the values of your organization? We had 77% say yes, and no at 26%. So the results are real time. So you're still kind of trickling in. So it's about 3/4 yes, 1/4 no. I hope this is a good basis for you to start the chat today. So with that, Freddie, I'm going to mute myself and take it away.
Great stuff. So it's a really interesting results there. So 3/4 of people already aligning really, really well, which is really positive to see. So that is a core part of what we're going to talk about today as well. So how do you ensure that you stand out from the crowd and align your benefits with your values as a company? Because that really impacts how you're seen as an employer brand. So what we're going to talk today about is how that intersection between well-being and employer branding and benefits kind of all really play together. Because we know that during this extremely, I'll say, challenging recruitment market that's out there at the moment, having a positive employer brand and being able to display that can really impact and improve your ability to get the right kind of talent within your organization and also keep it as well. What I'm going to talk about today is kind of looking a bit more about that sort of intersection. And then we're going to talk about the results of a survey that we did all into personal safety perception. So we basically surveyed 2,000 employees and up to 1,000 businesses to look at how they perceive safety. Especially following the pandemic, we've seen a real shift and change in that perception. And that's having an impact both on sort of the well-being, but also on recruitment, retention, and obviously employer brand. So what we'll look at is the impacts of those and obviously how you can choose and make sure that those values that you've got are being displayed through your branding. I'll then obviously hand over to Tobin, who's going to talk about how you make sure you connect your values as an organisation with the benefits that you offer, and how that, again, obviously has that impact on you as an employer of choice. And then Dave will give us a case study of what they're doing at the works on how they're helping to protect their people and how that's having an impact, again, on recruitment, retention, and how they're seen as a business. Because right at the very core of the works is a very people-centric, caring business. And so it's very important for them. So let's kick off. Let's get into some of the results of, or talk about well-being. So I'll start off just talking about employer branding or well-being. I don't think there's any surprise here to anybody on this call that they obviously go hand in hand. There's a very, very close sort of link up between them. What I want to do is provide a few of the stats that really kind of reinforce that. We know that obviously over the last few years, and certainly since people have taken a bit of a reset following the pandemic, they've started to look at their work life really differently and what they want to get from work. And well-being has become not just like a nice to have, but become a real essential part of what they're looking for. So some of the stats, and these aren't our stats, but stats from different surveys and reports across the HR industry, we've seen that 62% of employees are now looking at well-being benefits as a key factor in deciding whether or not they're going to apply for a new job. So that's got huge implications on your appeal to candidates in a very competitive market. We've also seen that 45% of employees working at small to medium businesses would likely stay in their job and work for that employer longer if they've got a really good wellness program in place. And then another stat that's really interesting is the fact that people are 3 times more likely to engage with their work if they've got a well-being package and policy in place. So that hand between well-being and employer branding really kind of goes very closely hand in hand. We've seen obviously that there's been a huge rise in well-being, as everyone knows. So taking a quick look at some of the stats that have come from the CRPD, that again helps reinforce this rise and what's happening at more of a strategic level. What's interesting to note is that 70% of employers are now focusing on well-being at more senior level, which is a huge increase, certainly compared to pre-pandemic. 51% are also taking a strategic approach to employee well-being. And what I think would be really interesting, again, for the chat, if anybody wants to add this in, is whether or not you perceive your board and your organisations take this at a really senior level, and also if you're taking a strategic approach to it, or whether or not you're actually seeing, I don't know, more of a lip service being paid towards well-being at the moment. So that'd be a good discussion point to take on afterwards. But according to CRPD, they're seeing a real rise and increase in this being taken at a very high level. And also, as a result of all of this being taken into becoming more focused, 32% of companies are actually increasing their well-being budgets for this year. So, like I say, it's becoming a really essential part of any people strategy right now. And Deloitte did a really good survey earlier this year that looked at the impact this has on a business if you actually invest in well-being. So their recent study found that happy employees are 20% more productive, they're 34% less likely to leave their jobs, and also less likely to go on sick leave. And obviously on the flip side, where you've got unhappy employees, you're more likely to see them leaving their jobs. And 28% of those people were actually planning to leave their job this year. And those that were, 61% actually put this down to poor mental health. Now, what I like as a marketer is the fact that Deloitte have actually pulled this back to ROI. So you can actually see, and they've suggested sort of an amount that you could see in terms of return on investment. So they've actually suggested that you can see a return of £5.30 on average for every £1 invested in staff well-being. So if anybody's looking to make a case for investment in well-being, who's on this call today, have a look at that Deloitte survey. There's some really powerful stats in there that can really sort of help your cause really on getting more investment within well-being. So that's well-being, and that's and the rise of it and how that's connected with employer branding. What I'm going to do now is talk through some of the results of a personal safety survey that we did earlier this year. Like I said, it went out to 2,000 people and 1,000 businesses. What it's shown, and certainly a change we've seen post-pandemic, is that more people are feeling unsafe on a more regular basis. We've seen that 6.8 million people actually are concerned for their safety every single week, and that's either at work or while they're on their commute. And 58% of people have actually experienced like a negative event, so basically an unsafe event, either at work or on their commute as well. So it's quite high percentages and quite a high number of people who have this perception of not feeling safe. Now, this isn't workplace or type of work, it's actually more of a societal cultural sort of shift and change. More anecdotally, talking to people who are sort of implementing sort of safety apps and things like that for their employees as a benefit, some of the things that they've said is that working in cities and towns following hybrid working becoming more of a thing since the pandemic. The footfall and the number of people in public places has also decreased. So that safety in numbers has kind of changed as well. And that's really kind of actually changed the perceptions of how people feel while they're on their way to work. And talking about that, and a poll will pop up in just a moment that kind of looks at this from an HR perspective. But what we saw from our research is that actually feeling safe is quite prevalent outside of the workplace. So 6% of people are using public transport sort of during unsociable hours, so at night or very early in the morning. They feel unsafe basically while they're traveling, and 50% of those who are actually traveling alone also feel unsafe. So it's very much sort of an external factor where this safety really has an impact, external to the workplace, that is. And the other thing that was quite interesting is the stat over on the right-hand side, which is saying that 51% think employers should be responsible for them outside of working hours. So more than half of people believe that actually that employer should take more of a responsibility for not just the workplace, but actually maybe their commutes or even their workplace at home, if they're a hybrid worker or working from home more consistently. This is also backed up, a lot of these stats are kind of backed up by other different reports as well. So the ONS earlier this year looked at how people feel in public spaces. And again, it's over 60% of people feel concerned for their safety when it's dark. And the Suzy Lamplugh Trust also looked at public transport, and actually a bit of a rise in aggression and how people are feeling. So frustration element has really come into the mix over the last year. And that is having an impact on how people feel because of this increase in aggression. Now, what we've also seen, the impact from a business perspective, is actually 1 in 4 people have left a job due to a safety concern over the last 5 years. And again, actually, in a few weeks' time, we'll see another report come out from the Suzy Lamplugh Trust that looks at that as well, and on the impact of how people feel and the safety and leaving work. It's also affecting different sectors, as Dave will talk about, as he works in the retail sector, in bigger ways. So people who work in, say, hospitality, retail, or even care, where they're having to deal with the public, they're leaving at much greater numbers. We're also seeing that employees wouldn't consider those kind of frontline public-facing roles due to safety concerns because of this sort of change. And this quote is an anonymous one from the survey, and it's from a retail worker. It kind of sums up some of those feelings. So this person said, I work in retail, and our company has cut staff hours so much that they now have to lone work for part of the day, usually at the end where it's dark and quite deserted outside. And she said, I hate this part of the day as I feel unsafe on my own, especially when locking up and leaving. So that obviously has a bit of an impact on how they feel and how they're being taken care of while they're at work. Added to that, we also saw in the survey that people feel less satisfied in every area of their job as a result of feeling unsafe. As again, I don't want to sort of like quote GCSE sort of business theory back to people around Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but if you can sort out the base layer, then people are able to do their best work. And what we've seen here is that if people's base layer of feeling safe isn't being well attended to, then actually at least the dissatisfaction. So we looked at things such as pay, benefits, and career development, of obviously overall satisfaction with their job. And for every single one, anybody who noted a feeling of not feeling safe, actually they scored lower on every single one at an average of 9%. So it's having a big impact on how people feel about their company and about their job. And finally, just on this, there was over the last 2 years, we've seen a real rise of personal safety apps. So people are actually doing something about how they feel in their own lives. And there's been over 1 million downloads of free personal safety apps over the last year and a half, which shows that actually people are doing something about it. They're downloading this kind of technology already. And this kind of relies a bit more on their friends and family, which is not quite so good because they have to act as a proxy to emergency services, but it just gives those people that sense of safety while they're going about their lives. So we've seen a real increase in this kind of change. And then finally, what we've also seen, and connecting the dots between personal safety and the well-being factor, we also asked them if they were to be offered, either as a benefit or as part of their role, a safety device, how would that change their outlook on their employer? And what they said is that 48% of employees would see their employer in a much better light if they had that access to a personal safety device. And actually 2 and 3 would take it up as well. So there's been a real change and a real impact, actually. If you look at personal safety as an aspect that probably many people aren't at the moment, and offered that as one of your benefits, then that's likely to have a big impact and improve your view as an employer brand, and somebody that really looks after their people, not just in the workplace, but actually beyond. So again, kind of connecting those dots, looking at sort of the employer brand and how you can start to stand out from the crowd. Thinking about your values and how you focus on your people, and then making sure the benefits that you've got in place can have a huge impact in terms of your employer brand, and therefore your ability to attract and retain talent. I'm only looking at a very small aspect of it, but what I'm going to do now is hand over to Tobin, who's going to talk about all the strategy behind it and all the different values and benefits that you can evaluate in order to make sure that you're aligned between what you offer as an organisation and how that helps impact your employer brand. So I'll pass over to you now, Tobin.
Thank you, Freddie. And in true Chris Whitty, I'm going to ask you to move the slides on by giving you the knowing nod. I've only got 3 slides, actually. It's going to be a lot of me talking and flapping my arms around and getting excited about some particular issues that I'm going to go through. Freddie, if you wouldn't mind just moving on to the next slide. I think I just wanted to start with this positioning piece, which isn't necessarily about Amba per se. It's more of an observation about what's going on in the employee benefits marketplace at the moment, for the want of a better expression. If I think back when I was first getting into business 20 years ago, and I thought about what attracted me to a company and the reason why I'd want to go and work for them, globally, the world was in a very different place. The values that we held as individuals and what we were looking for were probably very different. It was probably still a time when we expected to work for businesses maybe for 5 or 10 years before moving on to our next jobs. And as a consequence of that, some of the things that we were looking for from the employee benefits packages were quite, they were sort of almost like pillars. You expected to see a pension scheme. It would be nice if there was some healthcare there that you could get for yourself and for your family. It would be nice if there's some insurances if you were unwell and you needed to get your salary replaced. And for a long period of time, that seemed to be, other than being able to flex family members in and out, that seemed like a fair composite employee benefit package to be able to have. But then things started to change really quickly. And I suppose that there were 2 things happening at the same time. The main one being, and I think we've probably all observed it, is just a fundamental shift of the generations that are now in our workforce. At the time I was there, I think I'm Generation X by category. But that's, I was the majority of employees at that point. That's not the case now. Right now, Millennials and Gen Z account for over 50% of the organizations, the employee base of the organizations that we work for. And their thinking has fundamentally changed the way that we present benefits back to organizations and how we now start to use benefits as a recruitment and a retention tool, and try and start to match it against the values of our clients' employers actually have. And some of the things that have really accelerated that change, Freddie, you touched on a couple of them, but there is no doubt that the pandemic had a huge accelerating factor on some of the thoughts, some of the observations that I'm about to make. And if I was to categorize one, it would be that the blurring between what is at work and what is at home has been irrevocably diluted. So I could be at work while still sat in my front room, or I could be in the office. But the main point about that is, though, gone is the times when the values I hold as an individual are left at my front door, and then I go into a workplace and I absorb your values. I bring mine with me, and I expect your values as my employer to reflect the ones that I have. And then you look at some of the drivers and some of the sort of psychological motivations for the newer generations coming in, and they are motivated by different things. And then suddenly the relevance of an employee benefits package is called into question almost immediately, and thought needs to be given about what is something that's compelling to be able to retain and attract the best possible staff into our organisations. Freddie, would you mind moving us on? Amba is a B Corp business, so we spend a lot of time thinking about business as a force for good. And one of the things that we took a lot of time to do is to try to understand what happens to employees in terms of how long they might stay at a business, or whether they would join a business if there wasn't that value match between the values that I hold as an individual, the values that the business has, and how easy it was to be able to see that connection. And the reason I'm telling you all of this is because the benefits that you offer can be that connection, that conduit between both of those things. There's a full report that covers into this, which I'd be delighted to share with you at any time. But the key thing to sort of take away from this right now is that, well over 2/3 of employees at the moment are somewhere between moving and thinking about moving jobs based on the fact that they feel that their values aren't matched with the employer that they currently work for. Now, my conjecture is that isn't always true. It's just that it's not obvious that that connection has taken place. What my role is frequently with businesses is working very much with clients, with customers, and saying, can we define what your values are, and can we now build an employee benefits and reward package that presents that directly back to employees so they get it completely. So almost a summary of that would be, how do we build a compelling EVP for you as a business? How do we then curate a benefits package around it that is the most powerful attraction and retention tool for the talent that you want in and staying with your business? And it probably comes all the way back to a quote that I heard probably 10 years ago or so in a similar conversation to this, where one of my clients looked at me and says, a business plan is just a random collection of words if you haven't got the talent to execute it. And I think that really resonated in the sense that we desperately need to retain the key talent that we've got, and we need to bring new talent into our organizations. And being able to match these two things up is a very powerful conduit to be able to do it. One bit I'll add into this before I just move on and give you some examples of some of the newer benefits that are around at the moment that help make these, bring this sort of connectivity together, is that some of the fundamental thinking of individuals in our organizations has really changed. And one of the things that is right at the top of thinking at the moment is, what does the company I work for do as a force for good, particularly when it comes to environment and sustainability? And how can it enable me to live out my own values in that regard with those subjects in their own right? Now, you might be excused for thinking, well, what on earth that's got to do with employee benefits? So I'm just going to give you a really quick example. So if you can imagine this for a moment. I'm 22 years old. I'm coming into business. I care deeply about the environment. I've chosen a business that has explicitly said it's got a net zero goal by 2050, 2030, whatever it might be. I'm now looking at the employee benefits package, and I'm just going to be auto-enrolled into a normal pension scheme. But as an individual, I know that that pension scheme, due to the assets that you're investing in on my behalf as an employee, that employee benefits, is contributing 23 tons of CO2 per year, per pension pot, per employee into the environment. Now, suddenly when you think about it in that regard, you start to see the misalignment that can happen really quickly. You know, I would start to question why don't we have a net zero pension scheme? Are there any other employee benefits that are out there that might help me with my own transition over into leading a more sustainable life? Can you get me access into electric cars or green energy tariffs? And these are the type of things that we're starting to really see move quickly now. Freddie, would you mind moving this on? So just to sort of try and pull all of that together and, you know, sort of take you through some of the thinking that we do as a business. On the left-hand side of the screen are Amber's values. So these are ours, and we're very excited about them. We talk very openly about them. And it sort of leads back to the journey we go through with clients that we work with, is we help define what those values are, package them and communicate them, and then specifically build employee benefit programs that align directly back to them, so that there is that direct connection between an employee saying, I get this company, I really like what they stand for, and now when I'm in my reward and benefit package, that's coming back to me, I can feel it and I can connect to it. So in our instance, what you're looking at on the right-hand side of the page is, given what we are and who we stand for, these are the benefits we offer our own staff. Now, what I wouldn't say is that these are right for everybody, but what I would absolutely say is that there is a process to go through to make sure that what is on offer does make that connection. But perhaps the most striking thing when you look through that list of benefits is that probably, I don't know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, some of them, we wouldn't even said that's an employee benefit. We would have looked at it and gone, well, no, an employee benefit is something like a company car or it's private medical insurance. But this is the point that I'm making, I guess, really, is the pace of change that's happening at the moment, that for you as an employer, offering things like carbon offsetting and carbon neutral pensions are suddenly front and center of your employee benefit packages and the way that you're trying to retain and attract staff into your workplace. So let's just sort of bring all of that together and summarize it really in terms of what's happening at the moment. There's a fundamental shift going on in values within the workforces that are employed by us at the moment. And by nature, that workforce is transient. Its average length of stay at company is about 2 years. Our job collectively is to try and get them to stay longer and to get more talent into our businesses. The way to do that is to be able to present your values very clearly in front of them and align benefits that are meaningful and resonate back with that value strategy. And the conclusion of all of that is the breadth of benefits that are out there now, which can make that connection, is infinitely wider than it was in the past. It's not just, do we have a pension scheme? Do we have medical insurance? It is, what else can we now bring to the surface that creates that sense of belonging? Because when that sense of belonging is created, whether it's well-being, as Freddie talks about, or any of the other things that are on the screen here, there is a much healthier chance of being able to keep people with us for longer and attract new businesses, new employees into our businesses. Thanks, Freddie. I think that's pretty much covered it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tobin. It's great. I'll hand over to Dave to go through what they're doing over at the Works.
Thank you very much indeed, and I say good morning, everybody. And for me, whenever I engage with an audience around people safety, whether it's a junior colleague within the structure or the audit committee I was presented to the other week, there are three absolute givens. Number one is that retail, perhaps arguably even the world, is a crueler place, okay? If you look at the BRC statistics that were released some time ago, denoting a threefold increase in incidences of violence and verbal abuse against retail workers, particularly during the COVID lockdown period. And I'll be honest with you, I see no signs of that reversing. So every single day, I am dealing with incidents of abuse, violence, physical threat, potential harm, which are absolutely bewildering. I came many, many years ago from a financial services, banking, CVIT background. And I'll be honest with you, some of the aggression that is offered up because a colleague will not refund an item that's purchased 7 months ago, they'll offer a credit note and not a full cash refund. A shoplifter's banned from store and doesn't like the way they've been spoken to. And some of that ensuing aggression is stuff I was seeing in the 80s when somebody was trying to commit a cash in transit robbery. It is absolutely that serious. So that's number one. Incidences are on the up. I see no sign of that reversing. At number two is the policing response. I think we're probably all acutely aware that the policing response, particularly to incidents of violence within retail, is not where we want it to be. I think that's a whole discussion for another day. We could almost have a webinar just based on that. Again, I spend a significant amount of my time dealing with senior police officers, dealing with police crime commissioners, just trying to ensure that retail crime is on the policing strategy in a position where it deserves to be. And for me, the most important one, at number three, is that our employees, we know, join us with a formal contract with terms and conditions and pay and all these other expectations formally captured. But increasingly, informally, our employees are expecting and demanding that we address some of the scenarios that they see in store on an absolute daily basis. We were talking about churn and well-being and the impact on churn, which really resonated with me because I've just been dealing now with a really problematic store that's beset with issues in terms of levels of prolific, persistent abuse, shop theft, aggression, both from opening the store to closing the store. And we've just lost from there now a really talented assistant store manager that had been undoubtedly tagged to go on to do greater things within the organisation in terms of her career trajectory. And she's left us because, and she made no bones about it, we couldn't keep her safe. And for me, I've not had many, fortunately, I guess, personal failures in my career, but for one, that really did hit me. And it was a long drive home. It was a store down south, a very long drive home. And it's really stuck with me that we failed that individual. And whilst remotely, we were throwing different interventions at the store, none of them were really landing in terms of keeping that colleague safe. So for me, that's one that's really hit me. And you know what? At unemployment at what we're now, sub 3.5%, retail workers, traditionally not the highest paid workers on the marketplace. The choice for our employees, particularly in that retail context, never been greater. You know, if they don't like the way that they're being treated on a Monday, you know, they've got the ability then to be leaving employment on the Friday and starting somewhere else the following week. And I think this is all that we're dealing with. I joined Works in January of this year. I was faced with that traditional landscape that everything needed attention. So what did I go after? Was it the stock shrink? Was it the EPOS data that may be concealing elements of internal dishonesty? Was it a burglary series that was stretching down the M11? And there's an absolute irony that the first business case that I landed, and probably one of the easiest business cases I've ever landed with an executive, was about looking after our colleagues in terms of issuing out lone working devices, in terms of taking steps to absolutely assure their personal safety. And because of that, we're on the cusp now of allocating out, there'll be north of 400 plus devices. They will go out in swathes to what we recognise as traditionally the higher risk stores. The Works 530 stores across the UK, Republic of Ireland. We trade in some salubrious areas, we trade in some not so salubrious areas, and the risk changes accordingly. So we'll send out swathes of the devices to colleagues in swathes to the highest risk stores. And out of all the initiatives I've landed in my career, and I've been around here before with lone working devices, personal protection devices, this is the one that really gets the buzz from colleagues. It really does. Forget, 6-figure sums spent on CCTV installations across an estate and so on and so on. This is the one. It's got this tangible impact on colleague safety. And you can, that buzz absolutely resonated. When I stood up and I presented to a room full of store managers, there was this palpable gasp that, at long last, the employer was actually reaching out and doing something for the colleagues. And there's a bigger picture here as well, because I think traditionally, particularly in this industry, we've always kind of thought that, well, risk starts when you put the key in the front door and you open up for business. And then it finishes when you shut the door and you lock up. And we know that that's absolute folly. We've heard Freddie before talking about the perception of that journey to work and so on and so on. And again, with the allocation of this initiative, it's absolutely folly if, we just say, well, you take the device and you dock the device and you shut the front door and you've locked up for the day and all is good in the world. Well, it's not really, is it? It's not. If you've then got a 10-minute walk down a deserted arcade of stores to try and get to an unlit car park. It's not then if you've got, a public transport journey that's going to take you through some of the less salubrious areas and make you feel personally at risk. So part of the device allocation is that I'm also looking to allocate those out to those colleagues where that risk will continue outside of that locking the door up at night and walking away from the store, because it's incumbent upon an employer that we recognise that and we actually respond to that. But I'll also go further than that as well. Mm-hmm. I've already spoken to a colleague who's due to get the device imminently, who's suffering from some stalking offences within her personal life. And that's something that I'm really proud to say that as an employee, we've supported her with in terms of looking at move of store, in terms of supporting her to report that to police and actually engaging with police on her behalf ourselves. And I know, because I've been down this road before, I'll also issue out those devices in the face of personal circumstances such as domestic violence, because as I say, it is absolutely incumbent on us as an employer that we recognise the well-being of colleagues, and we recognise that simply does not start when they open the front door, does not finish when that front door is locked and secured. So for me, it's a real significant change within the industry. I think had I been appointed to this role, probably even a decade ago, my first priorities would have been those that you could have really tagged that tangible return on investment. I'm sure I'll be rolling out masses of CCTV and getting into EPOS data, and I'll do all that in the fullness of time. They're all going on in the background. But again, the very, very first significant spend initiative that I've managed to land is all people safety centric. And that, again, makes me incredibly proud. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dave. It was great.
Yeah, that's me back. That was thank you so much for all of your insights there. Dave, if you're still there, I'd like to toss out a question to you right away, please. We had a poll up about should HR teams focus on employee safety outside of work? And the results were 73% yes, no 26%. We have another poll up. I'm going to get to that in a second, but I want to kind of go, Dave, because it's fresh on my mind. Some questions I have about, sort of your remit. With that poll result, so we're saying again, 3/4 that HR teams should focus on employee safety out of work. What would you say to the quarter of respondents that say that they should focus on employee safety out of work, Dave, from like your sort of retail lens?
We need to judge each one on its own personal circumstances. So I never would stand up in a plenary session and say to a room full of colleagues that I'm here to cure all ills and the employer's there to cover you from A to B to C in every single eventuality. It's a contextual question, it really is, but I do think that we need to realise the role that the employer is playing in so much of this. If we are almost forcing an individual to work from home for a period who may not be enjoying the best personal circumstances within that home setting, I just don't understand how we can think we can walk away from scenarios like that. And some of these are, for me, it's without sounding clinical, that they are such quick wins, so that the colleague that's been stalking, that may well start to permeate into a workplace. It's not done so far. But just to issue out that lone working device, just to allocate that device with her, you could see her light up at the thought that there was somebody that was taking her personal, it's been disappointed with the police response. Let's leave that to one side. But the thought the employee was standing up doing a bit, it was, absolutely fantastic for her. Don't claim to be able to do everything for us. So I'm not talking about, putting man guards at the front of our house and stuff like that. These are just some simple little tweaks that we can take to look after the welfare of the colleagues that we need to, deliver for the business.
I think that's really great. And it's kind of a good sort of silver lining to that sort of story you were telling before about losing that other colleague, that assistant manager who was tagged up for greatness, right? What it really does too on the business end of it is that you reaching out and helping this particular employee, they're going to go and talk about it, their experience at work. And then that is going to, and does nothing but like impact the employer brand. So it's a great example. One small thing, one case-by-case basis could really impact the employer brand. So we have a couple questions coming in, but I'm going to address a question. It's something that Freddie, that you and I have talked about before, and I would love to hear everyone's sort of thought on this. Freddie and I have talked about this before. Have the people's perceptions of safety slipped a bit during the pandemic? Basically, has working from home kind of lulled people back into this false sense of safety, right? We were all inside for, a year to 18 months, and then we're back out in the stores, we're back out in the office. Have people gotten sort of like safe apathy? And Freddie, let's start with you.
It's an interesting question. I think in some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. So I think one of the things we've been hearing from a lot of our customers is that actually it's kind of increased a little bit their sort of awareness of their safety, and certainly because of it, like I said, I think during the presentation, there's been a real change to obviously working hours and the way people work. The hybrid nature of working means that places that used to be full of people, so like public places, towns and cities, are no longer as full as they used to be. So I think that's kind of raised people's sort of awareness of it. So I think more than anything, kind of coming back now, they seem to be hyper aware, whereas I think beforehand they probably were a bit more relaxed. So I think it's actually changed it in that way, rather than sort of become relaxed about it. But yeah.
Great. Toby, do you have any thoughts on that?
It's a great question, Eric. I was just thinking about it as the CEO of a business. We've got 50 employees or so. There are definitely things that I worry about on their behalf that I probably didn't worry so much about before from a safety perspective. And one of the key ones is the sort of the fragmentation of people working hours. So it's a very sort of hybrid working pattern that we have, so people can, log on, log off, be in the office when they want to. It does concern me when people are on their own in the business for long periods of time. And, Dave, I think you mentioned there's an unlit car park outside for people to walk out to into the evening. So anecdotally, I think that as a business leader, I'm concerned about it. And interestingly, I feel like it's my responsibility as their employer to make sure that we do the best that we can to make sure people are safe getting to and from the office and throughout their working day.
Yeah, great. Dave, if you're still on, I'd love to know your thoughts about safety and apathy during the lockdown. Do you feel that people have kind of forgotten about what their sort of personal safety bubble is throughout the pandemic as we're back in offices and back in stores?
No, if anything, I think it's probably enhanced, to be honest. And what I am seeing as predominantly a bricks and mortar retailer is that we've got some trading patterns, trading conditions that have just really changed post the pandemic. So, whilst we've seen that the retail parks, iconic location shopping centres are doing really well, some of the high streets, even coming up to 5, 6 o'clock in the evening are utterly deserted. Whilst pre-pandemic, that may have been a different picture. So I think for us as employers, that risk landscape has changed, and our colleagues are acutely aware of the risks that they are facing. Far more volume of my emails now, interaction at store level, is around personal safety post-pandemic, without a shadow of a doubt, around these particular scenarios. When we lock up this store, the high street's deserted. When we're doing this walk, to public transport, to a car park, is utterly deserted. So I think though that they are the things that have seen change post-pandemic.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question about safety, and then we're going to head over to the benefit side. Do you feel as though personal safety should only be relevant in sectors where staff are at a higher risk? So, for example, retail or public-facing roles. And Dave, if you're still there, sorry to keep tagging you in here, but I feel like this is a great question for you as you've worked in sort of different environments.
No, absolutely no. So I will deliver darker nights training that will be on a modular approach that will be available to all members of staff, whether they are store-based, whether they are traditional head office-based, male, female. It's available to everybody. Whilst I think there is an enhanced risk faced by certain employees within the organisation, I think there are some key messages that should resonate with everyone.
Right. Thank you. All right, let's shift it to benefits and values. And we have a poll up right now. And it's, what benefits do you currently provide to your employees beyond the basics? So we've had this poll up for a while, and right now, 28%. So the top vote is flexible working. And then it's followed by professional development funding and retail discounts, which are tied at about 17, 18%. Then we got health insurance at 14%. And then a gym membership, interesting, at 8%. And then rounding out, we have the coffee, food vouchers, and season ticket loan. I personally would love a season ticket loan to my Glasgow team of choice, but I'm told I can't say that out in public. Support, right? But so interesting. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on that, Tobin? Flexible working and professional development funding.
Yeah, so a couple of insights on that. I don't think it's any great surprise that flexible working, given everything we've just talked about and post-pandemic, is so high up there at the moment. I think it does go back to what I was saying during my short speech, though, was that it's odd that we talk about flexible working as an employee benefit, right? Because we wouldn't have done 10 years ago. It would just be it's a thing, but now it's really meaningful for people. The one thing I will pick out of that list, though, which you touched on, is the importance of retail discounts at the moment. Now, retail discounts have been component parts of employee benefit packages for years. But of course, at the moment, we're in a cost of living crisis. And I think that sometimes when we start looking at the changes that we can make to an employee benefit package year on year to make it and for it to continue to be relevant, I think the power that we wield as employers to make life easier, faster, cheaper for our employees should never be overlooked, nor the impact of being able to do that. So things like retail schemes, shopping schemes are an incredibly important thing to have at the moment. Just if I may, Eric, just take that on a slight half step.
Please.
And a number of the benefits that you've just talked through, particularly things like gym memberships, adding people to medical insurance schemes, there are some massive tax advantages for the employee and for the employer in doing those, particularly around salary sacrifice savings as well. So I just wanted to sort of bring this thread to people's attentions that we put what we can in front of people for them to be able to live their lives cheaper, but we should also take into consideration the impact that particularly on tax and take-home pay, that having an employee benefit scheme can actually create a really positive story for employees. So no huge surprises in terms of what you went through. Perhaps only one, that medical insurance wasn't higher than it actually would have gone back 3 years, and that would have been top every time. But it's a taxable benefit. I suspect the tax amount that you have to pay to have it now in the current climate would put people off quite quickly.
Yeah. So interesting. I was kind of thinking this in my head when I saw the poll this morning. So Claire Donnelly has written in, interested in the view of whether flexible working is just the statutory right or something new and exciting like hybrid or home or 4-day week. And I guess Claire's wondering, and I'm wondering as myself, what do we mean by flexible working?
Well, look, I'll give you a view, and whether it's something that we should just do as an employer or whether it's a benefit, that's a really interesting discussion. You give me 2 hours, Eric, and we could really tear that one to pieces. What I would say, though, is my sense is that I'll take it in a slightly different direction. So going back a year ago, lots of businesses started to pull together what we call total reward statements. So you list out every single benefit that you provided to an employee, and you put a value next to it, and you would say to your employees, this is what your value to us is as an employee. It's not just your salary, it's all of this other stuff that we pay for. What's very interesting now, though, is that a number of the things that we would probably add on to that total reward statement, like flexible working, I'm not sure you could put a value on it. Yet it's massively powerful and meaningful for the employees that have access to it. So for me, I think it is a benefit to be able to give employees the opportunity to do that, and it does carry a very high value. Actually, putting a number against what its value is, then, Eric, is a more difficult thing to do.
Yeah. Do you think as time goes on, there could be like a monetary value attached to that? Is that something that we just need to let it evolve, or is it just going to kind of be? This is
I think there's a productivity ROI that
right.
will come out over a period of the coming sort of 3, 4, 5 years. I think all of us feel at the moment that we've been on this curve where we first went into lockdown. We were all incredibly productive, smashing out the Teams meetings, working this higher end. Then we've gone through this lull of we've got no human connection. We want to get that back. So things have gone the other way, and it's going to stabilize. But I think what we will see in the fullness of time, that flexible working does lead to higher productivity.
Yeah. Freddie, any thoughts on that?
No, I totally agree. I think what you're talking about in terms of the future is that flexible working just become a standard, won't it? I think it's starting to be expected now. So it's often being offered, but it's not offered by everybody. And I think that's when you get to the point of when it starts to get offered by everybody, then I'll still argue it's a benefit. I think lots of people still regard that as a benefit moving to a new company. But in the future, it's probably just more likely to be an expected one rather than an added one. I did have sort of a slight question as well, Tim, because I was interested around the generational sort of aspect. Sorry to jump in there, but
please.
You mentioned that there's a noticeable difference. I was wondering how acute is that difference? Because I don't know, generational differences in attitude sometimes piques my interest as to whether or not it's real or not, if you know what I mean. So I think obviously new generations coming into businesses obviously engender certain trends a lot more, but they're still seen throughout the entire workforce. So I was wondering, either from your research or from what you know, have you seen this sort of only effect, and it's the new generations that expect these new benefits that you listed earlier, or whether or not there's just a bit of a difference between the generations?
It's probably the most profound difference I've seen in my career, actually, Freddie. I would have agreed with you that in the past there's been subtle changes.
Yeah.
I remember reading, I think it was about the time of the last general election, when we actually could vote on who was our leader, and they ran a poll alongside it, and if they had dropped the voting age from 18 at the time to 16, the Green Party would have got into power by a landslide majority. And it's a crude way of putting those values are walking into our workplace as we sit here now. And I think, talking from my own personal experience, I have 3 daughters. The decisions that they would make about who their employer are going to be are incredibly different to the ones that I would have made going back 20 years ago. Of course, salary is important. And of course, how much holiday you get is important. But decisions are made on much more sort of arbitrary and personal things. So I quite frankly, I've never seen a change like it in my career. And I honestly think it's here to stay, Freddie.
Is it reflected also in the fact that the candidate market at the moment is quite competitive, so therefore they do have that kind of that ability to choose, whereas maybe during worse times when the jobs are scarce, they don't have that sort of freedom almost to sort of choose who their employer is.
It's no doubt it's an employee's market at the moment to be able to choose as employers, it's very difficult to make our voices heard in a compelling way above all of the noise coming out from other businesses as well, which comes all the way back to why having such a compelling employee benefits package is such an crucial ingredient to have.
I'm just going to chime in here because I know, Tobin, you said that you are proper Gen X. I argue with my partner a lot. I fancy myself as a Gen Xer. I got the Pearl Jam poster back there, but I was born in '81, so technically now I'm that zillennial, I think it is, where it's Gen X, millennial. Nice. So I didn't have internet in high school, but I had internet in university, right? Which was only a gap of like 2 years, right? So for me, in my personal sort of job journey, coming out of uni, being sort of that Gen X sort of mindset, I didn't think about anything like that, like employee purpose. But now, as I've gotten older, I certainly have. So it's amazing to see how that younger generation, like you said, have changed, but has also sort of influenced sort of like, and I can't believe I'm calling myself older, but older people like me, right? Interesting question that came in kind of along the sort of generational lines. This came in earlier in the session. How do you balance the new and changing benefits when you have a long-serving workforce who don't want that change, but also knowing that you need to attract future talent who want something different? It goes to a line that you wrote down, Tobin: keep talent, but also bring talent in. That's a perfect question wrapped around that. What do you think?
It's such a brilliant question. And that's actually quite a difficult thing to do. Doing it well is with technology. So what you can't do is just shove a big benefit schedule of, different benefits in front of a group of employees and just say, go through this lot and work out the ones that you like. I think, one of the things that's happened is that we can now profile individuals as they come in, and we can present back to them the benefits that we think they'll be most aligned with. More importantly, though, this idea now that we just say, okay, Eric, on your first day, you're going to have some medical insurance, some pension, some other bits and bobs. What we would more frequently do now is give you a sum of money within a piece of technology, and we would say to you, go online, read through everything that's in there and select what's important to you for your values and to you and to your family. There might be some rules around that to say, we need you to have a little bit of health cover because, we care if you get sick. But beyond that, it's your decision to make. And I think that then allows there to be a multifaceted employee benefit scheme running at the same time, where different elements can appeal to different cohorts of people.
Great. Freddie, any thoughts on that?
I was going to say, I agree. I think that's so important right now to have that flexibility, because it's down to where you are in terms of your life stage to kind of come back to that point. So, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been bothered about the pension as much as I probably am right now, for example. So that's more important to me, working towards, I'm looking to retire anytime soon. It's a good 20 years away, hopefully. But, that sort of thing is where my mind is at, because my life has changed. And I think that's really important, therefore, to have that flexibility around what you can choose and have that ability to get the ones that are right for you in terms of that life stage. So, yeah, I think what you've said there, Tobin, sort of makes a hell of a lot of sense. Yeah.
So we have just about 2 or 3 minutes left. We had one last question from the audience I'd like to address real quick. If you guys can just give me your high altitude views on this. Are there any tips you can give to help us find out what our current employees think of our values? Is it a survey? What is it? Tobin, we'll start with you.
Yeah, there's some great survey. It depends how big your organization is, but there's some great survey tools around. I have to say that getting the values piece right is one of the most critical things to actually do. And I've seen a lot of businesses change their values over the course of the past 6 months, rather than just stick with the ones that they've got. But plenty of survey tools around to do it, Eric, but it's important to get them right.
Yeah. Freddie?
Best places I've seen actually sort of really bring the employee's voice out really, really well. So I think some of the best organizations actually have those kind of working groups, and those groups that can be a voice for those people. But also having things like workshops to look at every single stage and different levels of the organization and different departments really helps to shape that values and what makes sense there. So I think it's a bit of a combination. Obviously, that gets a big pulse doing a survey, but actually those workshops where people can have an active say really helps you understand who thinks what and why, and that can really help.
Then maybe the next webinar we can do on active listening, how to take in that feedback and expound those employee values led by the employees. That is it for our webinar today. I really appreciate Tobin and Dave. Thank you so much. Freddie from Peoplesafe. Just a bit of housekeeping, everyone out there. This session will be available on demand later today. So if you want to relive any of the magic or wisdom that any of them, not me, gave you, please go ahead and do that. Also forward it on to any colleagues that might have missed. And just a reminder that today's webinar, just like all of our webinars at HR Grapevine, is powered by Onvine. That is our own bespoke virtual platform where you can host your own webinars just like this. So once again, thank you everyone for attending today. Really appreciate you. And Tobin, Dave, and Freddie, thank you so much.
Pleasure.